Has debate jargon become too much of a chore? Does every round you enter leave you wanting to know more? Well, look no further because one clap is the key. It's time for Professor Graham and Kevin's ABCs. Hello, debaters, and welcome back to another episode of Professor Graham's ABC's Debate. I'm Professor Graham, here with my pal Kevin, and today the word of the day is going to be critique. So grab your popcorn, it's gonna be a long one. This video will be quite the dive. However, I don't have unlimited time, and this isn't supposed to be a 5-hour lecture, just a cute little intro video. So we're going to break it up into 4 different sections. We'll talk about what a critique is, when to run one, what are the parts of it, and how do I answer one. First off, what is a critique? At its most basic level, it's usually an ethical objection to something. On the negative, it's an objection to something the affirmative said, whether it be the representations of the AF or the actual debaters. On the affirmative, it's usually an objection to the resolution. These objections tend to be rooted in the idea that the knowledge that you've produced in creating your files, writing your blocks, finding evidence, the language you use, intentionally or not, are products of a larger problem that you should be rejected for. A good example that will be prominent this year in policy debate is something like the capitalism critique. The argument is that the AF's idea that they can fix poverty or deter war with strong economic growth are rooted in a capitalist mindset, one that, among many things, will likely result in large amounts of resource extraction, causing forever wars, conflict, and climate change. There are many types of critiques, and a lot of them fulfill different purposes, but I think this example covers a basic gist. Capitalism is bad, you support capitalism, so the judge shouldn't endorse you. Now that you know what one is, when do you run one? Well, there are really 2 kinds of rounds to run a critique in. Frequently, you'll see one-off K rounds, which just means people are reading one off-case position and it's a single K. This means the entirety of the debate is about just the critique and probably some case debating. This is used to help bolster things like framework arguments, which we'll talk about in a second, and allow you to have maximum time to develop the story of the critique and get all the parts you'll need to win the round out there as soon as possible, like multiple links and impact scenarios. You can also run the critique in a flex round, where you run the K in combination with DAs, counterplans, and/or T, where the goal is to either make the affirmative mortify that you could go for it, causing a disproportionate time trade-off, and then you crush them on the other parts of the debate, or they undercover it because your lack of development makes it seem less viable, and then you explode it in the block. Usually, these types of rounds aren't super conducive to the critique without explicit planning beforehand, because most DAs the negative will want to read on any given topic probably also endorse whatever thing the K team is critiquing, whether it be capitalism, securitization, settler colonialism, etc. An example would be if you read a security K and then argued that we need to stop viewing Russia and China as inherently evil or aggressive, but then you also read a DA that says that Russia will escalate Ukraine to a nuclear conflict. Now you've linked into your scholarship which you just argued was bad. That doesn't mean that flex is inherently worse than one-off Ks. Actually, in most respects, being a flex is probably better, but it also has its trade-offs. So do what works best for you. Now, we know what a K is, but how does one work from a technical level? Well, a lot of people, especially those more familiar with traditional arguments, like to think of it as a combination of a counterplan and a DA. The critique is made up of 3 parts: a link, an impact, and an alternative. The link is exactly what it sounds like. You uphold capitalism because you assume the market system will lift people out of poverty. You uphold settler colonialism because you don't give indigenous people a say in your AF, which results in resource extraction of their land. Your impact, then, is why those things are bad. Capitalism results in climate change because our desire for growth doesn't take the environment into account. Settler colonialism results in constant settlement of indigenous folks, which crowds out ways of life and is overtly racist. Those are pretty straightforward and covers the DA portion of this combination. The last part, the alternative, is the negatives advocacy or counterplan. The alternative usually argues that instead of endorsing the affirmative's plan, some form of resistance to the structures of power should be preferred instead. Why endorse the affirmative's neo-colonial project of capitalism when you could vote for a team that advocates for progress towards socialism? This part of the critique is what creates the competition between the AF and the neg. Without the alternative, the DA portion of the critique would just be terminally non-unique every time, because things like capitalism, anti-blackness, and set call are already prevalent in the world. The AF is just another instance of them. So by advocating for an alternative to the plan, the critique is able to say it doesn't matter how unique those issues are, the AF just makes them worse, but they have a solution to fix it. Don't be afraid, Kevin. Critiques, just like every other argument in debate, will have answers. Typically, you'll want to follow the acronym F postal to check all of the boxes and have multiple winning strategies, no matter the critique. I won't be able to go too in-depth on each one, but I will speedrun and include all of them right here. F stands for framework. K-teams like to do shifts in later speeches to say that you don't get to do things like weigh your AF against the impact of the K because things like fiat are fake. But the stances that you take on those issues are real. Make sure to include a preempt to these arguments by saying that you should get to weigh the consequences of the plan. P stands for perm. Just like a counterplan, you can perm a critique's advocacy. Their usual arguments are that all links are disadvantages to the perm. Or in simpler terms, every reason why your AF upholds capitalism is a reason why our movement to end it would fail. That being said, going for permutations can help you prove that your AF isn't the underlying cause behind the issues, especially if you win that you do something positive. We call this the perm double bind, because either the affirmative is a drop in the bucket in the grand scheme of things, like capitalism, or their theory of power is so deeply ingrained that no amount of resistance could ever remove it. O stands for offense. Generate some offense against the thing they're talking about. In some instances, capitalism is good. Warranted securitization does protect people and save lives, so don't be afraid to fight them on that. Obviously, this doesn't extend to things like anti-blackness, and this is not one of those doubling down / refute for the sake of refuting moments. Don't do that. S stands for solvency. Prove the alternative doesn't solve for what they say it solves for. T stands for theory. Just like counterplans, if a K is conditional or does something else that seems questionable in the realm of debate from a competition point of view, you should call them out for it. A stands for alternative. The alternative can sometimes be very underdeveloped, so making sure that you call them on their ability to solve for it and result in a societal revolution overnight will put you back in the game. If you think that we could ever overthrow the government with protests without the government sending in hordes of tanks to stop our revolution, you're trolling. Finally, L stands for links. Contest the link when they say you uphold securitization. Just because they assert something is true about your AF doesn't mean it is. They're generating links just like on a DA, and you have the power to refute those 10 out of 10 times, so don't be afraid. Critiques can be a lot to learn. If you ever need to learn more, there are plenty of other resources out there that I can certainly link in the description down below. But outside of that, yeah, I hope this was useful. Shower? I hardly know her, dude. Hey, thanks again for watching today's episode of Professor Graham's ABCs of Debate. As always, I'm Professor Graham, and that's my pal Kevin. Yeah, if you ever need any help with debate stuff at all, my email should be right up here. Just make sure you CC your coach. I'll get back to you as soon as I possibly can with any debate tips that you might need. I'll drop that knowledge on you. Bam. Thanks for watching. It's been a pleasure. See y'all later.